I think I would tell you anytime I've been to an African country, it feels like I'm going home. It's just a place where my heart is at peace. I feel completely comfortable there. It's a place that brings me absolute joy. I could sit in a safari vehicle all day long and be completely happy. So that's a place I always, want to go back to is really any of the African countries. And there's so many I haven't been to.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. My guest today is a very, very busy lady. And well, I don't really know how busy she is, but when I was going through her social media, I saw that she does a lot of things. And we are going to find out one after the other what they all are. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Dr. Morgan Garrett.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
I think we met on Facebook.
We did. Yes,
Did
we
we?
actually met on Facebook and you were looking for podcast
Yes,
interviews.
yes. I know many people complain about social media. I think social media is great because you get to meet great people like you.
Absolutely. And in an age where social media is all of our lives, it really is the best way to network, I think.
Totally. Now, Morgan, you are from Kentucky, and my knowledge of the US, I think Kentucky is quite remote. It's not New York, it's not LA. How does the girl from Kentucky travel to all those places? How did it start? Where does the travel bug come from?
That is a great question. Yes, Kentucky is considered a rural state, mostly eastern Kentucky, where we have our Appalachian Mountains, which of course are beautiful. But I was blessed with the ability to travel really through my family, actually. My dad is a business owner, and he really wanted to instill that love of the world and traveling because that's what he does for work. I have an older brother who's 12 years older than me. And so when I was a kid, that was the way that he and I got to spend time together was through family vacations. So every year they decided to take us on a big whirlwind adventure and we got to go somewhere new every year. He and I shared a room, unfortunately, so there were definitely some crazy stories with that. But yeah, I got to visit, I think I'm at 62 countries before I turned 30 years old.
Out of the US, what was the first overseas trip?
That's a great question. I think it was probably a European trip when I was about 3 or 4. And we went to Spain, Switzerland, just a lot of Europe. So I don't quite remember a lot of that. And we did Mexico when I was quite young as well.
So, but obviously, I think you wouldn't remember things that happened when you were 3, 4 years old. I think that goes back too far.
Yes, there are definitely like some things I can kind of remember, like being run through train stations in Europe, or seeing monkeys in Mexico, or things that just stick out to you as a child. But definitely not, kind of the big exciting memories we think of.
But I've seen other things that you do. Are you a photographer or is that a hobby?
It's a hobby, actually. I picked it up in about 2016 when I was traveling through Iceland and I went on a trip to Italy with one of my best friends. And I thought, why not pick up a hobby while I'm doing it so I can remember all of these things? So I bought myself a camera and kind of turned it into something that I've really enjoyed doing even more full time now.
Because you have a special separate Instagram account for your photography. But I was just going to say, you do use a camera, not your phone.
Yes, I use a Canon camera. I actually switched to mirrorless this year and I purchased all the lenses right out of my pocket. And it's actually something my husband and I do together for fun.
Do you never lose lenses or cameras or leave stuff behind? I'd be worried about that most.
I'm pretty careful about it. I think if you had to ask, it would be my dad and my brother who tend to leave things behind. So I just don't leave it with them. But my husband and I have kind of figured out a system and we carry everything in our backpacks and we've done really well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's precious stuff, It's not. It's like losing your phone, or no, it's worse. And some of those cameras or some of those parts are very, very expensive.
Yes.
Now, Recently, if I'm correct, you were in South Africa. When were you in South Africa?
Yes. So we did, my family had never been to the continent of Africa. And so we decided that for our family vacation this year, we would do kind of the Southern Africa kind of whirlwind trip. And we took them to South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Botswana in August. And so we spent about 16 days there just safaring and enjoying food and culture and meeting people. And it was a wonderful experience.
When you say the family, do you still travel with your parents or,
We
yeah, like
do.
you did when you were a child?
Yeah, so my husband and I do a trip now, the two of us, once a year. And then he and I actually went to India in May of 2024. And then we did a family trip with them in August.
You know, you sound a little bit like me because you you like to go to different places and you also like to go far. What
Yes.
happened to you then in 2020? Because in 2020 I started this 21, I started the podcast because I couldn't travel anymore. So I thought if I can't travel, at least I'll be able to talk about it. How did you feel during COVID?
Oh, it was hard. I won't lie. Especially being in the US where we have so much to see here. We couldn't even travel in the US really. And so it was very, very hard. I definitely realized things that I had kind of put away from traveling, like, mental health issues like anxiety, depression. Those were starting to creep back in because I couldn't travel. I couldn't go places and see things and use those experiences to kind of heal. And so I think we took about a year and a half off. And then our first big trip back, we actually decided to do a national parks trip. We really hadn't done a lot of the national parks in the US with my family. And so we went out to Utah, actually. We did Arches, we did Zion, we did all of them. And it was incredible. And it made me realize there's so much here in the US that even we don't get to see that often. So that was my first kind of trip back, and most people would say, "Oh, well, that's not super exciting if you've been a world traveler." But I found it really, really invigorating, and it was exciting to see. And then shortly after that, as soon as we could get on the plane with the passports, we were off.
Where
We
did you
we
go
went.
first? Where was your first after COVID? What was the first destination abroad when you were allowed?
We went to Italy with my parents, and it was actually where my husband proposed to me. So it was
How
exciting.
romantic.
Trip.
That was so he realized during COVID that you should stick together.
Yes, we actually started dating right before COVID. We went on 2 dates and then the world shut down.
Oh
So he and
my
I spent
God.
we spent a lot of time in an apartment together, just getting to know each other. And I figured if I can hang out in a single room with him, we're probably going to be okay.
That is beautiful. And there are so many such stories because of COVID. I mean, there are so many interesting. I was actually having coffee with friends yesterday, and we were kind of saying, one of them said to me, I miss COVID because
Yeah,
it was, like people had to be home at 9. You could invite people
right,
to your house and you knew that they would be leaving at 8:30 because they had to drive home.
right. Yep, it was definitely a different time, and we got to know a lot of people a lot closer than I think probably we ever hoped to.
Well, true. But I want to come back to something you said before about going to Utah and going to the parks, and it's generally the United States, because I was a tour guide when I was young, and I was a tour guide in the US. And people make fun of the Americans because many have never had a passport because they haven't been away. But to be honest, the United States offer everything. There is everything there. You have the desert, the plains, the mountains, the snow, the Pacific, the Atlantic. Really, it is a very, very beautiful country.
It really is. And it's so diverse. And, for people that live on the East Coast where I live, if you've never been out to the Pacific Northwest, I mean, it's completely different, right? If you go to Arizona, like you said, you have the desert. You go to New York City and it's a big city. So we really do kind of have all the best things, really. You just have to want to get out there and see it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, this is the thing in Europe. I don't know, to be honest now, I don't know. I should know that. Is Europe bigger than the US? Probably, maybe, but probably not much. And I mean, it's just different countries, different, but it's the same. And I think if you have a closer look at the United States, there's a big difference between the North and the South, and between the East and the West in mentality as well, and in culture.
Yes. Absolutely. Kentucky would be considered a southern state. We are technically in the Southeastern Conference of Sports. So, yes, we consider ourselves the South. And my husband's family is from Ohio, which is literally right above us. And it is that we are vastly different cultures. Down in Kentucky, we have sweet tea and horses and bourbon and Southern hospitality. And in Ohio, it's snow and all kinds of different things, and it's definitely a different culture, and so that's kind of an interesting thing about the US is if you go east to west you get different, if you go north to south it's also very different.
Very much. And also what you mentioned, the Southern hospitality, because it's like here in Europe, countries like Italy, Spain, Greece, they are much more hospitable than the countries in the North and Scandinavia. I'm not saying that, the people are nice. It's not, it's just more open. And I think it's got to do with living outside more.
I think so too. Especially, the South, we have a lot of hiking. We've got, you can be outside because it's warm a lot of the year. And in the North, you're in February, you're stuck in your house because there's three
Yeah.
feet of snow on the ground. And I think you're right. The South is a lot more, we're outdoors people, really.
Yeah, but I've now coming back to something else. I've not, you are a life coach. You do coaching, don't you?
I do.
Because
That's a new business venture for me. I'm a nurse practitioner by trade. And during COVID, I was working as a nurse. I got very, very tired. Immediately went back and got my nurse practitioner degree. So I was very, very busy. I was nonstop. And just realized through traveling that there's a lot more in life that I want to be able to share with people than just medical knowledge. And I feel like that's really what I did for about 10 years of my life was just study medicine. And so travel actually is kind of what inspired me into life coaching. It's something I'm now kind of building on the side to do. And my business is called Wanderlust Inc. Coaching because that's what I do. I coach people through travel and experiences rather than just dealing with anxiety or dealing with depression or building confidence or whatever, those things that people might want help with. We do it through experience, which is something that I know a lot of people don't really do. So it's been a really interesting journey. It's been really, really fun.
You're touching such an important subject here, which often makes me laugh because you are teaching or talking about experience because there are so many life coaches out there now. Everybody is a life coach. Everybody calls themselves a life coach. And, I know some people personally whose life is a real shit show. Sorry for
Mhm.
it. And they are a coach. And I sometimes feel like, I obviously don't say it, but I think, sort yourself out first before you start preaching to other people. But anyway, I think because I'm a coach as well, and I think travel makes you wise. And because I was a tour guide, I also had all this people's experience, which you have too, because you speak to people when you travel. And I think the more you understand people, the more you can get into this stuff, into life coaching, or I'm a hypnotherapist as well. What do you think? It's that.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I think some of the biggest lessons I have learned and some of the things that I've really kind of grown and healed from are through meeting people. I'll tell you a really great quick story. My husband and I went on our honeymoon to Kenya and Uganda. And we decided to do the kind of the grand tour of Kenya, of course, before going to Uganda. We finished our trip there in the Masai Mara, a place I had always wanted to go. It was my bucket list trip, my number one trip. And we arrived at our camp, and the safari company said, "You have this guide. She's wonderful." And I kind of tilted my head and I heard she. And I was like, well, that's kind of odd. A lot of African countries don't allow women to be safari guides, or you don't see it very often. And we hopped in the vehicle, and there's this other wonderful German woman in the seat in front of us. And she said, "Oh, I'm an expat. I live in Germany now, but I'm like a feminist activist." She's like, "I wanted to come find the one woman safari guide in Kenya. So that's what this whole trip is about. So you get to have her too." And so we started talking to her, and her name is Evelyn, and she is a wonderful human being. She is the first Maasai woman to be a safari guide in Kenya. And she has this wonderful story. She was homeless from the time she was 7 through the time she finished college. And her father was actually a well known kind of chieftain in their Maasai village. he kicked her out of the home because she wanted to go to school. And so she was homeless. She was living on couches and floors and washing dishes and doing laundry. And she put herself through college and got two master's degrees in safari guiding. And so it's really just one of those, serendipitous moments where we would never have met Evelyn unless this other tourist had been seeking her out. And really just spending 5 days with her and getting to hear her story and realizing that the things I had been through as a human were completely different from her, but she and I could relate so much. And the hardships that we see as human beings really can be relatable, even when they're completely different. And so Evelyn became a little bit of like a sister to me. We keep up to this day. She's just a phenomenal example of working hard and pursuing your dreams, and really doing whatever you want to do, even if it's becoming a life coach at the age of 30 after you've done another career. So she was just a really awesome person to meet, and she's a great example of how people you meet on your trips really change the way you think about your life at home.
That is so true. And you know what? I'm going to Kenya on Friday.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
That's so funny. When you started talking about Masai Mara and Kenya, I thought, yeah, that's where I'm going to be next
Oh,
week.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I have only been to Mombasa. I've never done a safari, so it's time to
You'll love
one.
it. You'll love
But
it. It's
what
wonderful.
you are saying is so true. And I also see that with seeing clients, because you actually heal yourself with every client that you deal with because you recognize yourself in their story.
Yes. And that's what I love about kind of the coaching that I'm stepping into is people kind of come to me and they say, "Well, I'm not going to Kenya on a trip. How am I going to learn the things that you learned?" You don't have to go 1,000 miles away. You can have those same experiences here. I always kind of use the metaphor of, you can travel to any third world country and see incredible poverty, right? You can see, your shanty towns, the trash everywhere, but the happiness that those people have. You could argue in the US, even, you go outside and there's poverty in the homeless community. If that's something that speaks to you, go help out at the homeless shelter. Go bring food to those people. Go talk to them. Make them feel like a human. You don't have to go 1,000 miles to have those experiences. And that's kind of the beauty of the coaching that I do is you can make it as adventurous and wild as you want, or you can go in your backyard and find the exact same experience.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is that we're all the same, aren't we? No matter where you are, people have the same desire to be happy, to be safe.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, you go to some of the most impoverished places in the world, and arguably they are some of the happiest people in the world. And it really is a beautiful lesson because those who have so little and those of us who we are blessed to have more, you go and you see them and you're like, how are they so happy? They have nothing. Well,
Yeah.
they have found joy in the everyday, right? They have found joy in the things they experience every day. And that's a huge lesson. That's something that I always bring home from a trip to a third world country.
Very much so. And unfortunately, we kind of never live in the now. We're always, while we're talking, I'm actually paying full attention to you, but I could already be thinking about the next thing
Right.
we're going to do. And I think that's
Exactly.
also something that we can learn is be here now.
Right. Exactly. And I am 100% the same way. We actually just got back from a trip to the Bahamas yesterday. And it was a wonderful, wonderful trip. But I found myself while I was there saying, where are we going next? What's the next trip?
But
What
that's
do I need to
normal.
find?
That's a different story. That's the
That's
travel
true.
bug.
That's true. That's a little bit different. But also, what's waiting for me at home? Is the house still in order? I have to go back to work. It's very hard to just be present and sit where you are and just be happy in that moment.
Yeah, I think it's quite an art, and I think we can learn or try to improve it. Even if it's just a little, we're never going to manage 100%. We're never going to manage to meditate 100%. There's always a thought coming in, but we can try. We can all
Yes.
make an effort. Now, are you still a nurse practitioner? Do you still work?
Yes. So I am currently leaving a role in nurse practitioner, kind of world, if you will. I'm actually going to be taking a new job in the next couple of weeks as a nurse. And so I'm going to be doing that, part-time mostly, and then working on my coaching business as well. The sort of the photography side you touched on is my creative spirit. Creativity is something that's so important to me, and it's something I get to practice a lot when I travel through photography and drawing and, just talking to people. I would say conversation is an art of creativity as well. So I've been practicing a little bit more self-care through creativity recently, and I found that really, really freeing and, just something that's really bringing me joy right now.
There's something else I noticed, which is like an additional thing that you do. You are fit. You exercise. You make sure that your body is healthy.
Yes, and that's something that I've always really been kind of passionate about. I was a competitive horseback rider for about 25 years, and so 7 days a week I was in a barn. I was riding, I was competing. I had to be top physically fit. I'm not a very tall person, so being able to control a 1,200 pound animal is hard. And then through college and after that, I just kept pursuing, the gym because it was something that, made me happy and it kept me sane, if you will. So yeah, I do spend a lot of time working out and taking care of myself because if you're not healthy, you can't travel.
Very true. All those things that you do compared to well, what you see at your work, do you never, or don't you sometimes think, if this person looked after him or herself a little bit more, if maybe this person exercised a little bit more, or if this person lived a bit of a more mindful life, she may not be here or he may not be here because or what I want to say is that all those things that you do, they add to life quality, and I think a lot of people don't care much about that, because there's always a pill.
Yes, you are so right. And I think the US is unfortunately probably one of the worst case scenarios as far as health goes in our world, which is sad because we do have the money and the ability to put into that sort of thing. But you're right. If you're not actively wanting to take care of yourself, you're going to end up in a hospital. And that's what I was doing in my job was I was actually coaching children with obesity. That's what I was doing every day in my old job. And it was extremely rewarding when I could get the message across. But what I found, unfortunately, is because we're a rural state, we have food deserts. We have poverty. We have people that don't have access to good, clean fruits, vegetables, healthy meats. It's all processed here. And so it was very hard to get my message across to families. And it became a big burnout for me. And so I stepped away from that. And that's why I sort of pursued coaching was coaching is a way to do preventative medicine in a way, right? You can work out your issues now. You don't end up in a hospital. And so taking care of both mind and body is something that is so important to me. And it's something I care about, and I want to help other people do that.
This is so true, and this makes so much sense. And what you're saying about access to food, because if a huge bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken is the same price as 2 kilos of carrots at Whole Foods, and you have to feed a family, what are you going to buy? The carrots. This is the problem. I think the problem is exactly that. And in a country like the US, and it's not just the US, it's in Europe as well. But I know that it's bad in the US. This is the problem. If food was subsidized, if healthy, fresh vegetable were more accessible and cheaper, things would be different.
Exactly. And I'm so glad you brought up KFC. That is so funny to me because anywhere you go in the world, people say, "Where are you from?" And I say Kentucky. That's the first thing they say is Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is funny, but it also makes you realize people associate where you're from with fried, unhealthy food. And so that's just kind of a point of humor for me because it's true. That's what people associate Kentucky with. But you're right. If it's more affordable, if there's access to it, people are going to go for that. And that's kind of the one of the other things I've learned from travel is you go places like Uganda, India, places that seem so poor, but they farm all their food.
Mhm.
Everything comes from their backyard. No wonder they're healthier than we are. They can go outside and get some potatoes out of the ground or some cucumbers. They butcher their own meat. It's not processed. And so that's again food education, right? That's something else that travel has really taught me is you can go a lot of different places and get very, very different foods, but they're healthy foods. And so that's just been an interesting thing for me. Something else that actually we were just chatting about while we were in the Bahamas was we are the only country in the world that is allowed to advertise medications on TV. And so that's something that we were just, finding kind of funny and also kind of sad is, people are seeing weight loss medications and things that, treat cancers and, Parkinson's and all these things on TV. And that's just crazy to me because, again, you go anywhere else in the world and you don't see that. It just kind of tells you the culture that we've really built, which is sad.
Yeah, that has always made an impression on me. The ads and the medication and headache pills, like you can get them on
Right.
the counter or whatever. I want to tell you something else, though. I do not associate Kentucky with KFC. For me, it's George Clooney. He is from Kentucky.
Ah, yes. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so that is true. Also, Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp is also from Kentucky. I actually used to go trick-or-treating at his parents' house. So that's kind of a fun fact. And that and the Kentucky Derby and bourbon. That's what we like to be known for.
See, you see, there is a lot. Now, tell me, do you have a favorite part in the world? Is there something that you want to go back to? And I think I'm not, I don't remember. Have you been to 69 or 70 countries?
I'm at 62. And
62. Yes, that's a lot. That's a lot.
yes. Yes. And this year, I think, well, so my husband and I will be going to Borneo in June. So we're going to be doing some orangutan safari, some very, very exotic rainforest travel. And then I think my family is planning Egypt for this year. So
Wow.
hopefully get to knock off three more countries this year, which will be amazing. But as far as your question, I've always been drawn to the African countries. Like I said, Kenya safari was really my big bucket list trip as a child. I'm a wildlife lover. I'm a nature girl at heart. I wanted to see things like elephants and lions and leopards before they potentially go extinct. That's unfortunately the reality we live with is that a lot of these animals might not be here when my kids or my grandkids are on this planet. And so that was something that I was always really drawn to. And it was the place to me that felt most like home, which sounds crazy because they're a completely different culture than what I'm used to. But I think I would tell you anytime I've been to an African country, it feels like I'm going home. It's just a place where my heart is at peace. I feel completely comfortable there. It's a place that brings me absolute joy. I could sit in a safari vehicle all day long and be completely happy. So that's a place I always, want to go back to is really any of the African countries. And there's so many I haven't been to.
You must have been there in a previous life.
I think so. I think that's what my husband would tell you. And I've been a lot of places, but I've never been more welcomed anywhere than when I've been to an African country. And people always say, "Oh, it's scary." It's why would you go there? There's danger and crime and all these things. That's what CNN shows you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You've ever been to any of the African countries, they're the most welcoming countries. You feel absolutely like a sister, a brother. You get brought in just like family, and it's very hard to come home. I'm not gonna lie. I've always shed a tear when I've had to come home from any of those trips.
Beautiful. And yes, it's probably more dangerous where you are than somewhere in Africa.
Yes.
I want to come back to the 62 countries because sometimes people, oh well, 62, that's not much. Count your countries, people who are listening to this episode, because 62 is a lot. Because
But
once people start, they think, oh yeah, I have traveled a lot, and then they start counting, and maybe 30, 35, but you're already on the upper half. I mean, there's a lot of countries that we probably will never go to because I don't know, one doesn't travel there.
Sure. And, my husband will tell you my goal is to get to all of the countries. I actually have a friend who has, I think, 9 countries left. He will finish this year. And his last country is going to be Jamaica. And he's throwing a party in Jamaica so that everyone can come celebrate this achievement with him. So it's super cool. And I'm lucky to be surrounded by people that also have those goals and love to do what I like to do because it makes it easier, of course. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the 60s for your countries, you have to remember I did that before I was 30 years old. And so that's been a huge achievement. And I actually was just thinking about it. I checked off all 7 modern wonders of the world before I turned 30 as well, which is pretty cool. Not a lot of people
Amazing.
can say that.
I think that person who is having the party in Jamaica should be my podcast guest.
I think so. I think I'm gonna have to pass you along his name. He would probably love to come talk. But he is only, I believe he's only 39. So he's almost my age and he's done. So it can be done. You just gotta
Yeah,
have the
yeah.
willpower.
I know people who have. There's a nomad. I have had somebody on the podcast who has been twice, I think, to all of them.
Oh my gosh.
But
Wow.
look, the thing is, I think it's also a little bit about how long, what do you do? I mean, what counts as visiting a country? Do 4 hours at the airport count? I don't think so, because,
No.
you have to see places and understand the culture and get to know the people a little bit. And that's when you have been to a country.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think he would probably agree with that too. My rule is you have to be outside the airport for 1 full day, at least.
Okay, okay, that's good. One full day or
At
more.
least.
Yeah,
Yes.
at least. We're coming to the end, Morgan. But I want you to tell the people who are listening to us why they should travel.
That's a great question. Travel for me has been the greatest teacher. And that's really what my dad wanted me to get out of travel was, you can buy all the things in the world. You can buy a nice house, you can buy a nice car, you can have, whatever you want in your house. But at the end of the day, you can't take that with you. And the things that kind of last are the memories and the lessons, right? And the things that you experience, the people you meet. So for me, travel is the way that you grow. It's the way that you become a better person. It's the way that you change your life, right? So for me, you travel to grow. And you learn lessons, you meet people, you try food, you make mistakes, you do the wrong thing, you do the right thing. But at the end of the day, you come home with something people can't take away from you, and that's memories and experiences.
And what if the people tell you, but I don't have any money?
Oh, that's my favorite. You can travel as cheap or as luxurious as you want. I've definitely done both. You can buy a coach seat across the world as long as you are willing to endure a couple hours of being a little uncomfortable. And that's again something I teach in my coaching is getting out of your comfort zone, right? You might have to eat dinner at a restaurant by yourself, which is uncomfortable for people. But if you do it, you might get something really awesome out of it. So, money it's a fleeting thing, right? It will always come, it will always go. So take the chance. If you have the ability to do it, get on the cheapest flight you can, stay in a hostel, stay at an Airbnb, go camping. You don't have to eat at the most expensive restaurant. If you're willing to risk it, eat some street food. There's a lot of ways that you can travel and not be extremely wealthy. It's all about perspective and what you're willing to kind of risk to learn.
So true. And don't buy all that crap that you buy that you don't need.
Yes, that too.
Put that
That is a
money
great lesson
aside.
too.
Because as you say, we can't take anything with us.
Exactly.
And it just becomes clutter.
Oh yes, that's what we're dealing with in my house right now is putting stuff in storage because we have too much stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah. And we don't need stuff because, as you say, we need memories and we need experiences. And sometimes, sometimes things go wrong. And before we end, I want you to tell me, did anything ever go wrong? Have you had a bad time or a fun time because
oh
something went
yeah.
wrong?
Yeah, that's a fun question for sure. I've definitely had things go wrong, probably more than I have time to tell you. The one I'm thinking of, I went on a mission trip to Ecuador a couple years ago. We were doing medical mission work in Ecuador. I was with a group of college girls. I was still in nursing school. I wasn't even a nurse at the time. And we went on this nighttime rainforest adventure So you can already interpret that's probably going to be a little bit sketchy for a couple of American girls who were not well traveled, except for myself. We went on a back of a pickup truck with a guide who had no licensure, and he drove us into the rainforest and he said, I'm going to show you the coolest thing you've ever seen. Okay, sounds a little scary to me, but we're already here. We're going for it. We paid for it. So we're sitting in the back of the pickup truck. It is pouring down rain. We get into the rainforest. We were like, oh my God, we're lost. Who are these people? And we pulled up to this pond, and all of a sudden the pond started to glow. And we were like, what is that? And he said, oh, it's bioluminescent. And we were like, oh my gosh, that is the coolest thing we've ever seen. And he said, now I'm going to turn out all the lights in the car and I want you to just listen. So we did. We sat there in the complete darkness and all we could hear were tree frogs, snakes, birds. It was incredible. It was the most peaceful, 5 minutes of my life. And I did it because I got in the back of a stranger's pickup truck who probably was going to get me lost. So it really was one of those, is this going to be a scary moment or is this going to be something really cool? And, it probably wasn't the smartest decision, but it was a great memory. And I can still kind of hear those sounds today. And the running joke after that was, well, you should write a book about that experience. Well, what would you call it? Gringos Getting Lost. And so it's still in the back of my head to write that book one day about gringos getting lost, because there have definitely been a couple times where, as the white American girl that I am, have gotten myself into some not great situations. But they usually end up being great memories and things to laugh about.
Fantastic. And that was definitely way out of your comfort zone. So
Yes,
you are not
100%.
walking your talk.
Yes, 100%.
We're at the end. Thank you so much for being on Most Memorable Journeys today, Dr. Morgan Garrett.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.